Okay, that's good. I'm not that tall. First of all, congratulations, class of 2025. I'm old enough for that to sound like the far future, but here we are already. This is a huge and unexpected honor. Thank you. My only regret is that I can't share this with my parents, especially my mom, who was an academic and a role model for me. And when I ran off to a career in film and television, I think she thought I was going off to join the circus, and she was mostly right. But if she was here, I could say, look, Ma, the roads converged. It all turned out okay in the end. But I am very grateful to be here. I'm very honored. Grateful, but also a bit appalled. Honored, but also, I mean, this is an honor, but it's also a catastrophe, because I am not a public speaker. I never have been, never expected to be. Some people are afraid of heights. I'm not. My fiancée is afraid of snakes. She's also afraid of raisins, which I don't understand. But for me, it's this. This. Most of my life choices, some of my life choices, have been made to avoid situations like this. When I was studying history at Victoria College, my vision of heaven was to be sequestered in Robarts Library in one of those pointy windows that feels like you're in the prow of a ship, working in solitude with a stack of books and index cards. When I made my big transition, work transition, and went into film and television, it was still, it was more social activity, but it was still very much, it appealed to me because it was a work behind the camera, not being up here in public view. So I'm not really suited for this, and it gets worse because I did some research, and apparently you're supposed to offer advice and sort of life lessons in things like this. And I come from a family that is not strong on those things, and is kind of cynical about the whole idea. My father left us with two pieces of advice, which I can share with you today. One of them is, if you're ever parking, always start where you want to be and then work your way outwards. If you're transferring leftovers from a container into another one, it'll always fit in a smaller container than you think. These things have turned out to be true and useful, but we can agree they're all trivial too, and they don't really help guide a graduating class into the future. So my life has not prepared me for this moment to share this with you, and I decided I didn't have any other recourse but to embrace that catastrophe as my theme. So life will not go as you intend. Life will often not go as you intend is sort of the theme for me. Plans will falter, things will go awry. This is to be expected, and I think more than that is to be embraced. I think this occurs to me as an idea, partly because of my own career path, where I trained for years in one subject, history, European history, and then had a kind of radical rethink, a sensation that I was in the wrong room or in the wrong world, and went into film and television. And so I was unprepared for the world I went into, and it was a big disruption, but there was a continuity between the two. There was my love of history was to sort of study human behavior and try and understand humanity. And I think I've been trying to do the same thing in film and television ever since, exploring stories as a way to delve into what makes us who we are and why. I think I'd like to take a moment there to praise the liberal arts education. It's the Swiss Army knife of disciplines, I think. It's not just a first step in a prescribed set of steps to a career. It is the best step towards any career. And I think those of you who have gone that route, your life will be richer for it. I think if there were more grads going that route, the world would be a better place, and more resilient to some of the forces we see at work against us these days. I've heard that even like medical schools value the liberal arts degree because they know they can teach their students the science and the math and so on, but they appreciate a grounding in the human arts. It was certainly the case in my career. It helped me. And the career I've chosen as director has certainly driven home today's theme, which is that things almost never go as intended when you're directing. I think that's true of almost every career, every life, but especially as a director, it's more urgently true and more expensively true. We plan like crazy because we have to, but everything goes wrong all the time. The weather, the actors, the locations. So early in my career, I developed a habit, which I learned from a Russian cinematographer who was not a very sunshiny fellow, kind of a dark spirit, but when things would start to go terribly wrong, like, he would turn and say, "It's going to be great." And he said it ruefully a little bit, but also sort of defiantly. And it's become a mantra for me, that when things start to go bad, I sort of repeat that to myself, repeat it to the crew. It's kind of the noise that we make to each other, the story we tell each other when we're trying to find the will to sort of get through it, to when things are looking particularly dire. The same idea has found many expressions. Obviously, the basic concept of Ragnarok in Norse mythology, the idea that there's a battle at the end of time and we're going to lose, but we're still having to fight it. I think it's in Albert Camus' thoughts on rebellion. Hemingway explored it, and For Whom the Bell Tolls, there's a final mission at the end of the novel, and we know it's doomed, and we know it's meaningless, and we do the mission anyway. Nietzsche had a good phrase for it, amore fati, to embrace every part of your fate, not just the good bits, but all of it. And I'd like to pause for a second and thank, for those 4 references I just made so effortlessly, a liberal arts education. While working as a director, I learned a couple of things. My first bit of advice, there's only 2, following my father's footsteps. The first one was that all directors plan, we have to, that good directors are fully aware while they're planning that their plan is likely to collapse, and that the best directors don't just know what the plan is, but why they have that plan, what's behind it. There's any number of occasions where the shot you planned cannot work the way you meant it to, or the location you thought you needed disappears, or the actor is way too drunk today to work. But if you know why you needed that piece, you can find it. You can find it somewhere else. You can adapt. There are famous cases. Spielberg made a movie about sharks, actually one shark, and it turned out the shark was just a disaster. The shark sank, the shark floated upside down. The shark was the least scary thing he'd ever seen. So if you watch that film now, you'll see the shark is not in the movie for the first half, because he knew what he had to hang on to. And the movie he created was actually a much more profound existential dread movie than a scary thing about a bitey thing. So that was a case where losing something and the way he responded to it elevated the whole thing. I'm no Spielberg, but I've had occasions like that, smaller ones. We were shooting Game of Thrones in Iceland, and I'd chosen this location that was beautiful, sparkling water, little tiny floating icebergs, and we wanted something beautiful because we were bringing these 2 elements together. I don't know if anyone's seen the show, but Jon Snow and the wildlings were sort of meeting for the first time. And we got to the location, and there was no lake anymore. When it was still there, but it had frozen solid, and there was a dusting of snow over it. So no sparkling water, nothing impressive. And I started walking out onto the ice, and the crew started coming with me. And about halfway out, we heard like that in the ice, and every American and every UK crew member turned and headed towards the shore. But I noticed every Icelandic person just kept walking. So I kept walking too, and we wound up shooting the entire scene, not just looking at the icebergs from the distance, but amongst the icebergs. And so this beautiful setting for this important story moment was elevated precisely because we had a catastrophe. I think most directors will agree that their best work happened because their plan slammed into reality. That's not true of all directors. Hitchcock is famous for never, ever changing his plan. He storyboarded everything. He stuck to the plan. And that's why there's sort of an airless quality to his movies, I think, and it's also why he hated filming. it was boring to him. The movie had already been made in his head, and he didn't feel the need to make it again. So he's not exactly a role model for all of us directors. But I think most directors will agree that the best work happens when your plan is slammed. And I don't mean to be Pollyanna about that as a kind of general approach to life. I think some disasters are simply terrible and just disasters. I do not believe that everything happens for a reason. I do not believe that whatever doesn't kill you will make you stronger. I think frequently it will leave you scarred, miserable, and traumatized for life. But I do believe that there's a process, that this is the process where life happens, where creativity happens, and where the best work happens. Your plan hits reality. It forces you to focus really on what you really want and need. And in the long run, I think it makes you focus on who you are. A famous philosopher from Hollywood, George Clooney, is one of many people to say that you don't learn anything from success. I think that's true. Others have put it other ways. Career, life, it's not a monologue. It's not a, it's a conversation. It's not giving a PowerPoint, and it's not dictating a prepared speech, thank God. You're on a date. You're on a date with life and on a date with work. You could certainly approach a date with a plan, like 7 o'clock, tell her about your thoughts and hopes. 7:15, ask about her mom. But if you stick to the plan, you're going to be missing most of the reason to have a date, and it's probably going to be the last one you have, at least with that person. To elevate it slightly, and quoting the same source, Einstein put it more scientifically. He said, no problem is ever solved on the plane of consciousness that created it. I think we tackle a problem and we confront a problem, and in doing so we are changed, and that changes how we tackle it. Everyone has heard, it's not the destination, it's the journey. I think you can take it a step further and say, it's not really either, it's who you become along the way. Which brings us to my second piece of advice, which I promise is short. We're almost there. And this came very early in my experience at film school, which was kind of a brutal experience in some ways. I'm not sure what the system is here. It's been a while. But after first year, they cut the class in half. They tell half of you can't come back, and half of you are invited back for the rest of it. And so there was competition about awards and all this stuff. But at a certain point, pretty early on, I realized that at my best, I would make a movie that my competitor, the person I most competed against, would never make, and he would, at his best, never make a film that I would make. It was sort of meaningless to compete because we're on separate paths. We're like running completely different races. And the plan you start with, I should say, that insight that we're on our own paths, we're running our own races, and that they're unique, is sort of the main point that I'm trying to get to. I found it liberating and clarifying. The plan that you start with is important, but it's just the beginning. It's a projection. It does not describe you. Neither do the inevitable setbacks and failures. It's how you navigate between them that describes you. And that navigation and that path that you're on, that conversation you're having with life, the date that you're on, is as unique to each of you as your fingerprint. This is where great work, creativity, and your character are forged and revealed. That's almost the end of what I want to say today. But kind of side note, I feel an obligation to, you can't really talk about all this stuff, plans collapsing, things not going as you want, wondering how we should carry on without addressing our current situation, I think, in the world. More generally, I think no one should speak in public without saying at least a couple of things about the times we're in. The times are out of joint. The times are not ordinary. The plans that guided us and that we took for granted for a long time seem to be falling apart. The center is not holding. The best seem to lack all conviction, and the worst are full of passionate intensity. And for that phrase, I would like to thank a liberal arts education. Maybe pick that up. Academia, journalism, freedom of expression, human rights, all the good stuff is under attack. Fear is being cultivated and weaponized. Oppression is on the march. Ukraine, Gaza. The most wealthy country in the globe, the biggest military, once seen by many as a beacon, the place I called home for quite a while, is now slouching towards craven oligarchy and benighted fascism. Things in a very big way are not going as intended, not by the founders of that nation, not by anybody who believes in democracy, human rights, mutual respect, progress, truth, all the good stuff. But as we look around at ourselves and the world, we can see a response rising. Characters are being forged and revealed. I have to say, the recent vote in this country, the recent vote in Australia, even the choice in the Vatican are signs. Academic institutions are finding the will and the courage to reassert their rights and their beautiful obligations. So there are sparks of hope as we all encounter this setback and this failure to live up to our intentions. There are sparks of hope, and today is one of them. This is a day of celebration. You all had a plan, I think 4 years ago. You had a mission, you had an intention, and you accomplished it. As I say, in my experience as director, that's almost a statistical anomaly, that things would turn out as planned. But that makes it all more precious and worthy of celebration. And as you move out onward and into the wider world, I would encourage you to have a plan, yes, but to know why you have it as much as what the plan is, to hold tight to the first and be ready to blow up the second one. As you do, you will be forging a path that is entirely your own, unique to yourself, that no one has ever taken, no one else ever will take, the path that will not exist until you forge it. Each of you is bringing a unique set of skills, experiences, successes, failures, doubts, strengths, neuroses, gifts, burdens. I can guarantee that things will not go as you intend, but I would like to end by saying something I've said many times, standing in the mud, in the pouring rain, as we are losing the light, and the camera jams, and the actor's late, and the dragon refuses to come out of her trailer. I say this to you with a combination of conviction, desperation, some rueful irony, and some defiant optimism. It is going to be great.